What if I told you that one of the earliest signs of dementia isn't memory loss at all? And what if the warning signs have been quietly appearing for years while most people simply call them normal aging? Before we begin, I want you to do something very important. Take a moment to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Every week, I share evidence-based health advice designed specifically for adults over 60 who want to protect their memory, maintain their independence, and live a healthier, longer life. And while you're here, leave a comment below and tell me your age and where you're watching from. I read as many comments as possible, and I love seeing our community of healthy seniors growing from around the world. Now let's talk about something that affects millions of families, yet often remains hidden until it's much too advanced. Dementia. Most people imagine dementia begins when someone forgets names, gets lost, or can no longer recognize family members. But the reality is very different. In my years caring for older adults, I've learned that dementia almost never begins with dramatic symptoms. Instead, it arrives quietly, slowly, almost invisibly, long before anyone realizes what's happening. In fact, by the time a diagnosis is made, the disease may have been developing inside the brain for 15 to 20 years. That's why today's video could be one of the most important videos you'll watch this year. Because I'm going to show you 6 early warning signs that many people ignore, dismiss, or misunderstand. These are the signs families often look back on years later and suddenly realize they were there all along. And make sure you stay until the end because sign number 6 is the one doctors worry about the most. It's also the sign that often forces families to take action. Before we discuss the signs themselves, you need to understand what's actually happening inside the brain. Imagine your brain as a giant city filled with billions of roads connecting billions of buildings. Every memory you've ever formed, every skill you've learned, every conversation you've had, every part of your personality depends on those connections. When the brain is healthy, information flows smoothly through the city. But in Alzheimer's disease, the most common form of dementia, 2 harmful proteins begin building up. One is called amyloid. Think of it as sticky debris clogging the streets between buildings. The other is called tau. This protein forms tangled knots inside brain cells themselves, causing them to malfunction and eventually die. Slowly, these plaques and tangles damage the communication network of the brain. Streets become blocked. Buildings collapse. Entire neighborhoods begin shutting down. Here's what shocks most people. This process often starts decades before symptoms appear. Researchers can now detect changes in the brains of some people while they're still in their 40s and 50s. Long before memory problems begin. Long before a diagnosis is ever considered. This is why recognizing early warning signs matters so much. The earlier changes are noticed, the more opportunities there may be to protect brain function and slow decline. Let's begin with the first warning sign. Sign number 1 is repeated forgetting of recent information. Now, everyone forgets things occasionally. That's completely normal. I forget things sometimes. You forget things sometimes. But dementia-related memory problems look different. Let me tell you about a patient I'll call Robert. Robert was 72 years old when his daughter convinced him to come see a doctor. He insisted nothing was wrong. "I'm just getting older," he said. But his daughter had started keeping notes. She noticed that he would ask the same question 3 or 4 times within an hour. He would tell the same story multiple times during the same afternoon. He would make coffee, forget about it, then come back later and make another cup because he couldn't remember making the first one. What was happening? One of the earliest areas affected by Alzheimer's disease is a small structure deep inside the brain called the hippocampus. Think of the hippocampus as the brain's memory recorder. Its job is to store new information. When it becomes damaged, new memories are not properly recorded. That's why someone may vividly remember their wedding day from 40 years ago but struggle to remember what they had for breakfast this morning. Old memories remain stored. New memories fail to stick. The second warning sign is difficulty performing familiar tasks. This often surprises families because the person still seems intelligent. They can hold conversations. They know who everyone is. Yet somehow simple tasks become harder. A person who has cooked the same recipe for 30 years suddenly forgets steps. Someone who has managed household finances their entire life begins missing bill payments. A driver who has traveled the same route for decades suddenly becomes confused and takes wrong turns. These changes occur because dementia begins damaging pathways responsible for automatic routines. Activities that once happened effortlessly now require significant mental energy. Think about walking up a staircase in your own home. You've done it thousands of times. Now imagine some of those steps suddenly disappearing. The staircase is still there, but using it becomes much more difficult. Large studies have shown that problems managing finances, medications, and everyday tasks can appear years before a dementia diagnosis. Unfortunately, many families only recognize these warning signs when looking back later. The third warning sign may be the most misunderstood. It's a change in personality. Not memory. Personality. This is where many families say, something just feels different. Maybe a once social person becomes withdrawn. Maybe someone who loved family gatherings suddenly starts making excuses not to attend. Perhaps a calm and patient person becomes more irritable. Or a confident individual develops unusual anxiety about leaving home. These changes rarely happen overnight. Instead, they develop slowly over months or years. That's why families often blame aging, retirement, stress, or loneliness. But researchers now believe lasting personality changes later in life may sometimes represent one of the earliest footprints of dementia. In fact, many families report that emotional and behavioral changes appeared before significant memory problems ever developed. And that's exactly why this warning sign is so easy to miss. Most people simply don't connect personality changes with brain health. But they should. Now let's continue with warning sign number 4, and this one can be surprisingly revealing. It's the gradual loss of your sense of direction. Most people assume getting lost is simply part of aging. After all, everyone occasionally takes a wrong turn. Everyone sometimes forgets where they parked the car. But what we're talking about here is different. Imagine stepping out of a grocery store you've visited for years and suddenly feeling unsure which direction home is. Imagine driving to a friend's house you've visited dozens of times and unexpectedly becoming confused. Or perhaps hesitating at an intersection you've crossed hundreds of times before. I once cared for a gentleman who had lived in the same neighborhood for nearly 30 years. One afternoon, he went for his usual walk. A route he had taken thousands of times. Yet somehow he ended up several miles away, unable to explain how he got there. Thankfully, someone recognized him and helped him return home safely. What many people don't realize is that the part of the brain responsible for navigation sits very close to the hippocampus, the memory center we discussed earlier. Unfortunately, it is also one of the first regions affected by Alzheimer's disease. Some researchers now believe that problems with navigation may actually appear before memory loss in certain individuals. Think about that for a moment. Difficulty finding your way may be one of the brain's earliest cries for help. If you notice yourself or a loved one becoming confused in familiar places without another obvious explanation, it deserves attention. The fifth warning sign involves language. Specifically, finding the right words. Now let's be clear. Everyone occasionally forgets a word. That's completely normal. In fact, while recording videos, I sometimes lose my train of thought or struggle to find the perfect word myself. But dementia-related language changes happen more often and in a very specific way. A person may pause repeatedly during conversation, searching for words that should be very familiar. Instead of saying watch, they might say, that thing on your wrist. Instead of saying kettle, they might call it, the thing that boils water. Names of close friends, neighbors, and even grandchildren become harder to retrieve. Conversations begin slowing down because the brain is working much harder to access language that once came effortlessly. This happens because dementia gradually affects areas of the brain responsible for language processing. Researchers have even discovered that subtle changes in speech and writing patterns can sometimes be detected years before a diagnosis. Families often notice that conversations feel different long before they can explain exactly why. The words are still there, but reaching them becomes increasingly difficult. And now we come to warning sign number 6, the sign that concerns doctors the most. Poor judgment and risky decision-making. This is often the point where families realize something serious may be happening. Because unlike occasional forgetfulness, poor judgment can create real danger. Perhaps a person suddenly becomes vulnerable to scams. Maybe they send money to strangers. Maybe they trust people they would normally be cautious around. Perhaps they forget medications or accidentally take double doses. Maybe they leave the stove on and walk away. Or they begin neglecting personal hygiene despite always being meticulous in the past. I have seen many older adults admitted to hospital not because of memory problems themselves, but because those memory problems led to unsafe decisions. What's happening here is that dementia begins affecting the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for planning, judgment, self-control, and decision-making. Think of it as the brain's chief executive officer. When that system starts weakening, people often become more impulsive, more trusting, and less able to predict the consequences of their actions. Studies consistently show that older adults experiencing early cognitive decline are significantly more vulnerable to financial exploitation. In some cases, unusual financial losses may be among the earliest warning signs families notice. Now, after hearing all 6 signs, some of you may be feeling worried. If that's you, I want you to listen very carefully to what I'm about to say. Recognizing 1 or even 2 of these signs does not automatically mean you have dementia. Please do not panic. There are many conditions that can cause symptoms that look remarkably similar. Poor sleep can affect memory. Anxiety can affect concentration. Depression can affect thinking. Vitamin deficiencies can cause confusion. Thyroid problems can impact cognitive function. Medication side effects can interfere with attention and memory. Even chronic stress can make people feel forgetful and mentally exhausted. That's why a proper medical evaluation is so important. A good doctor won't immediately assume dementia. They will investigate thoroughly. They will review medications, check blood tests, evaluate sleep quality, consider emotional health, look for underlying medical conditions, and only then determine what might be causing the symptoms. If you're concerned about yourself, start keeping notes. Write down specific examples. Record when they happen. How often they occur. What changes you've noticed. These details can be incredibly valuable during a medical appointment. And if you're worried about a loved one, approach the conversation with kindness and patience. Avoid confrontation. Avoid arguments. Instead, focus on concern and support. You might simply say, "I've noticed a few changes lately, and I'd feel better if we got them checked out together." Often, that gentle approach works far better than trying to convince someone something is wrong. And now I'd like to leave you with something hopeful. Because despite all the fear surrounding dementia, there is also reason for optimism. We know more about brain health today than at any other point in history. Research continues to show that healthy lifestyle habits can make a meaningful difference. Regular physical activity, quality sleep, a nutritious diet, social engagement, mental stimulation, good blood pressure control. These factors all contribute to a healthier brain. While no lifestyle can guarantee prevention, evidence suggests they may help reduce risk and support cognitive function as we age. If you're over 60, I want you to remember this. Forgetfulness is not a sign that your life is over. Growing older does not mean becoming helpless. And even if challenges arise, you still have the power to influence your future. The earlier warning signs are recognized, the more opportunities exist to take action. That's why awareness matters. That's why conversations matter. And that's why videos like this matter. If you found today's information helpful, please subscribe to the channel, give this video a thumbs up, and share it with someone you love. You never know who might need to hear this message today. And before you go, I have a question for you. Which of these 6 warning signs surprised you the most? Let me know in the comments below. I read every comment, and your experiences may help someone else who is quietly facing the same concerns. Thank you for spending this time with me today. Take care of your brain. Take care of your health. Stay curious. Stay active. Stay hopeful. And I'll see you in the next video.